This is CityCast Philly. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Today, we're talking about the complicated conversations around data centers in the Philly region. Abby, thanks so much for being on CityCast Philly. You're a reporter at the Chestnut Hill Local newspaper here in Philly. And I'm sure as a reporter, you've covered a lot of different public hearings and public meetings, including one that you've been following in Upper Marion Township, which encompasses King-Of-Prussia. And we'll talk about these meetings in just a bit. But have you seen anything just as controversial as data centers?
Yeah, Trenae, this is truly unprecedented. I mean, I've been a reporter since, let's say, 2019, and I've never seen as much opposition or fervor as I've seen in these data center meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been covering the potential school closures in Philly, and there's a lot of passion about that. That's very contentious, but I think I've covered data center meetings in several different towns, and consistently I have seen massive amounts of opposition. It is very clear that people are pissed off, and that stems beyond the Commonwealth too. This is happening across the country. Projects are being shut down due to community opposition. Yeah, I've covered protests, I've covered public meetings. I've never seen opposition as consistent as I've witnessing these data center meetings. Yeah.
I read, Abby, I read in one of your recent pieces in the Chestnut Hill Local that folks are protesting, and they're doing so by showing up with signs and T-shirts and even humming, making kind of like mimicking the sounds of a data center. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen at these public meetings.
Yeah, people are putting in the work. There's been a lot of organizing. People from several towns attend all the meetings and they collaborate, and they've been getting creative with the opposition. At the Upper Marion meeting, when I recently covered, there were people made shirts saying no data centers. They were passing out a bunch of stickers and signs, and they also gave out a flyer saying there's going to be a point where somebody starts to hum to mimic the sound that a data center consistently makes. And somebody did that during public comment, and it was one of the many times the meeting was interrupted. Yeah.
Abby, what even are data centers?
Yeah, so data centers, they look like plain windowless warehouses with cooling units on them. What this facility does is it houses IT infrastructure, so it stores and processes digital information. It has servers, storage, batteries, networking gear, and this equipment runs around the clock, so it has cooling, backup power, and security measures to keep it all running. And data centers themselves have been around for decades, but hyperscalers, especially the ones built for AI, which we're talking about now and is being proposed in Upper Marion, although he hasn't specified whether it's going to be used for AI, but it's a hyperscaler. Anyway, they have a lot more computing power than traditional ones, and they're a lot bigger because there are a lot more servers to handle workloads like AI. Their data center, on average, roughly 100,000 square feet, while hyperscalers are more than 1 million. So they are a lot bigger, consume a lot more power, water, take up a lot more space. Yeah.
So, Abby, why does this topic concern Philadelphians? Because you said, these are conversations happening about data center proposals in Upper Merion, which is basically around the King-of-Prussia Mall area. But why would that concern Philadelphians?
Yeah, good question. I think it's the fact that one, at least in Chestnut Hill Local Northwest area, there are a lot of environmentalists. People care a lot about natural spaces here, and they're seeing that these data centers are being proposed in areas like the Poconos, where there are vast ecosystems and tourist attractions. And I think a few people are kind of realizing that nowhere is safe, really. They're inching closer and closer to Philadelphia. So more Philadelphians are starting to come, in terms of proximity, more Philadelphians are starting to become aware of it. But in terms of this specific data center, proposals are popping up along the Schuylkill River, which is a crucial water source, a crucial drinking water source for a bunch of people in Philadelphia. And these data centers consume lots and lots of water. They can consume a few million gallons a day, depending on what system you use. Some projects consume more than that. So it's a threat to the Schuylkill River. And then data centers also have long-term impacts on the air quality and temperature. So people are worried about that. And also in terms of the region, data centers have huge potential impacts on the energy grid. PJM, the grid operator, has said that data centers are leading to increasing costs. So people are worried about their electric bills going up.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then with Upper Merion Data Center, many people visit King-of-Prussia Mall, one of the largest in the country. The data center is a few miles away from Villanova. King-of-Prussia is a very popular retail and commercial area, so people would be interested in what's happening there because this project has some major implications for that town. Sure.
And we'll get into those conversations happening in Upper Merion Township after the break. Okay, so catch us up. So this summer, there were several data center proposals in Upper Merion. And you described that some of these data centers are the size of the King-of-Prussia Mall or the size of PHL, of the Philadelphia International Airport. That's insane to me. Okay, so how many data centers were proposed and what sort of feedback do developers have when concerns like water usage and energy usage is brought up in these meetings?
The data center proposals in Upper Merion, developer named Brian O'Neill, he's the founder of the King-of-Prussia based MLP Ventures. He's a very prominent developer in this area. He submitted 5 proposals to Upper Merion Township in May to build hyperscale data centers, and he wants to build them at the Discovery Labs campus, which is a tech, healthcare, and life sciences office complex in King-of-Prussia's Renaissance Park that he runs. And they're located in several different addresses, but collectively, if approved, this data center cluster would be more than 4.5 million square feet, which is larger than King-of-Prussia Mall and Philadelphia International Airport. It's a huge project. And he said that it would need nearly a gigawatt of continuous power, which is enough to fuel about 1 million homes. So it's
1
huge.
million homes.
Yeah, it's huge. And it would have natural gas turbines on site, backup generators. He said that it would increase the township's tax revenue by at least 50%, create lots of jobs. Hasn't said how many. So
I think that's what one of the commissioners pointed out, that
yes,
a lot of the information that folks are trying to figure out in terms of like the environmental and economic impacts, it was kind of vague.
yeah. He was a little unprepared to the meeting. He said that he and his team crafted a PowerPoint, but they submitted it shortly before the meeting, so they couldn't pull it up in the meeting. And most of the time when commissioners asked him a question, he said, "It's on the PowerPoint, it's on the PowerPoint." And commissioners would press him saying, "You represent the PowerPoint, you answer anything." Another argument that developers have used is that they don't have to answer these questions. They've argued that a lot of this information that commissioners have asked, they don't need to have at this stage in the legal process. That's something O'Neill argued.
So the meeting that we've mostly been talking about was a meeting that happened in July. And this was a meeting of the Planning Commission for Upper Merion, a township of about 35,000 residents just northwest of the city. So what are the next steps with the data center proposals in Upper Merion?
The Planning Commission, they haven't talked about all of the projects yet. They still have 2 more. So they plan to talk about that August 12th.
Oh,
and
today.
then,
Okay.
Yeah. And then it will move on to the Board of Supervisors.
Do public hearings and community meetings scare off developers? Or is this sort of something that developers anticipate? They anticipate pushback? Because I've been curious about that. Because again, data centers are not only controversial in the greater Philadelphia region and conversations that have been happening. I mean, these conversations have spread out across the country. So I'm wondering, in this sort of like race to build data centers, how much of community voice is successful in a way to scare a developer off?
I would say from my experience, it doesn't do anything. For the most part, from what I've seen, developers don't show up to these meetings. They usually send their attorneys. Or, for example, in Limerick, the developer's identity hasn't been revealed due to a non-disclosure agreement. So, for starters, they don't attend a bunch of these meetings, and they continue fighting it. I mean, towns have rejected these data center proposals, and developers still file an appeal. That's something that residents are expecting to happen, especially with O'Neill's case. There was a lot of shouting, a lot of booing, a lot of comments made at this meeting, and he still, at the end of it, tried to address the crowd and say, "You're being misinformed. You should really look into the information that you're receiving. I know there's a lot of emotion, but they just say that they're going to do their best to protect the community, and that they're going to work with the township." A lot of general, vague language. And no, O'Neill wasn't intimidated. I mean, there were a few people flipping him off, and he still,
Yikes.
no change whatsoever. I think that their argument is that the townships need the economic boost, the tax revenue, and some people have expressed their support for these data centers because of the construction jobs that it can supply. And
I was going to ask you, you were kind of answering this question, but having researched and reported on data centers, what do you think members of the public are missing? What do you think community members don't fully understand about data centers?
I think that one thing that township officials had to reiterate lots of times is that they can't reject a project because of the impacts it could have on the community. They have to vote on it specifically based on whether it complies with the zoning ordinance or not.
Oh,
Just on
interesting.
very technical reasons. So, and township officials, they have to be completely neutral. So the planning commission voted to not recommend these projects to the Board of Supervisors due to several outstanding issues, but they were mainly frustrated by the lack of information that the developers team had.
And these conversations are not just happening in Upper Merion or in Philadelphia. These conversations have made their way in Harrisburg, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's become both the support and opposition for it has been bipartisan. Both Shapiro and Trump have staunch supporters of AI data center development. They have both said we're in an AI race against China, and China wins. That would give them lots of geopolitical and economic power. They've also said it's a national security priority. The AI trend, it's growing whether we like it or not, and the governor wants Pennsylvania to economically benefit. Amazon has pledged $20 million towards data center development in the state. We have the land, we have the energy production and the workforce. So that's been a huge reason. But a lot of the legislation that I've seen proposed in the state has been around protecting ratepayers about the electric grid and also around water usage.
But Abby, I'm still trying to understand why there are proposals for data centers near some of the most natural, most treasured, green spaces in the state of Pennsylvania, like near our parks and our natural preserves and lakes. Why do data centers have to be there versus like, I don't know, in like an industrial part of the city or like at a warehouse?
Yeah, I would say the main thing is water. They want close access to water. Like I said, these data centers consume a lot of it. So it's another main reason. Also, the size of them. The proposals I've seen been around 2 million square feet. So want to propose it in rural areas where they have a lot of space. They want to propose it areas where there's cheap land, and I think where they think towns could use the tax revenue, or they could use the economic boost. And they also want to be near big power plants where there's close access to power sources as well.
Are there guidelines or standards issued by the state on data centers? Or is this really up to municipalities, local communities?
Yeah, so that's been a big issue with data centers because there is a lack of regulation, and these developers coming in, municipalities they can't reject a data center, but they can draft data center zoning ordinances to regulate them, mitigate their impacts. And that's what a lot of municipalities have been doing. But one issue is that these developers have been submitting proposals before these townships adopt that. So, and that happened in Upper Merion. So the developer has said that he will abide by these new regulations, but he doesn't have to. So there's a lack of regulation for sure. And the state even has a tax break to incentivize data center development. And Democrats and Republicans have supported ending this tax break, but that wasn't in the final budget. What the final budget did have was a provision on energy and water usage reporting. So these large data centers have to submit information to the state about how much energy and water they use.
Mm-hmm.
And Governor Shapiro has implemented voluntary standards. In February, he called them, grid standards.
Yeah, his grid standards. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where these aren't requirements. It's just that if data centers follow them, they can go through the fast track permitting process and receive tax credits. And these include, supplying your own power, having community benefit agreements. So he's encouraged data centers to bring their own power so that, residents wouldn't have to pay for them, but these are voluntary. And then there's a bunch of legislation, House and Senate, concerning mostly the electrical grid and water usage, but we'll see more of those conversations in the fall.
And let me just clarify for our listeners, GRID is an acronym that means Governors Responsible Infrastructure Development. Abby, you mentioned how there are some ideas for data centers and using the Schuylkill River, which is a major water system for Philadelphia. How would data centers impact Philadelphians' drinking water?
A lot of these developers haven't said where to get their water from. A few of them, especially O'Neill, have said they plan on using a closed loop system, which uses a lot less water, but still something. If they do draw water from the Schuylkill River, it have a major impact on drinking water supply. We can see our water rates going up. Also, the wastewater from these cooling systems in data centers contain toxic chemicals. So what harm can that have on local water sources like the Schuylkill River? People living near data centers have reported their water taps running dry and their water coming out brown and rusty. So that's a huge concern people have. Also in Upper Merion, there's a sinkhole problem, people have said in these meetings, and heavy water consumption can exacerbate that issue. So, yeah, we're just going to have to see what these developers propose, but it has huge potential impacts.
Could we start seeing data center proposals in Philadelphia itself?
Yeah, so the Philadelphia Planning Commission recently discussed that and mentioned possibly creating a new law to regulate them. They found that there were only 2 sites in Philly that could accommodate the large size of a hyperscaler, and any other possible sites would require them to change the zoning. So I think there's a potential for more data centers, but hyperscalers, from what I've seen from Philly officials, I don't see that happening, smack in the city. Yeah.
Abby, thank you so much for breaking this all down and for joining me on CityCast Philly today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You can read more of Abby's reporting by clicking the link in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know your thoughts on this episode about data center proposals in our area and share this with your neighbor. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Philly. All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.